everyone. So in my last video I mentioned a little bit about how in 2019 I was inspired by Hannah Louise Poston to do a no buy year in which I didn't buy any new objects other than replacements for a year or about a year. I didn't quite make it to the whole year, but I can discuss that at another time. In 2020 I decided to set another yearly goal for myself, and it kind of happened to be the same one as Hannah Louise Poston's. For a really long time prior to 2020, I wanted to do an inventory of all of my stuff because I've always been kind of drawn to the idea of minimalism, but I also love things. I love having a lot of beautiful things. I love clothes, I love books, I love perfume, lots of stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to see where I was at with my collection of things. So at the beginning of 2020 I did a stuff inventory. So I counted every single individual item in categories of clothing, beauty, and books, and I set myself the goal of at the end of 2020 having less than I started the year with. Along with that, I also kept track of every single item that I purchased in 2020 and kind of like photographed them and kept a spreadsheet about whether I purchased them new or used, or if I'd used them, or if they'd been used up and had left my collection, all those kind of weird little data details. And now that we've come to the end of 2020, I'm getting ready for my stuff goal for 2021. But first, I wanted to share with you my results for my 2020 project. In this video, I'm going to go through some of the numbers of all of my stuff. I didn't want to run through a whole list because it's a lot of numbers, but some of the numbers for my stuff inventory and how it changed over the year, whether I reached my goal of finishing the year with less stuff. I also have some details about what I purchased and some new goals for 2021. So if those kind of like numbery things are really interesting to you, then please keep watching. So first we'll jump into the stuff inventory. So like I said, I broke all of my things down into 3 categories, which are clothing, beauty, and books. So I'll run through the numbers now. I've got my spreadsheet here. In January of 2020, I counted all of my items and I had 136 items of clothing. So that included coats, cardigans, sweatshirts, dresses, sweaters, long sleeves, t-shirts, tank tops, work shirts, because I have a uniform for some of my jobs, pants, skirts, underskirts, sportswear like athleisure kind of things, shorts, swimsuits, pajamas, underwear, socks, bras, tights, undershorts, and then I had a miscellaneous extras category. So all of that came to 136 items. And then at the end of 2020 in December, I now have 153. So major changes included the category of dresses, which went from 17 to 23 by the end of 2020. I purchased a lot of dresses this year. Other categories were my pants category went from 5 to 8, and my skirts category went from 9 to 15. So one of the things that I spent 2020 doing, especially in the lockdown, in the pandemic quarantine, I decided to develop a sense of personal style, or a little bit more of a clear sense of style, and that included purchasing a few things. I'm not bothered by the amount of things that I purchased or how much this category went up because I love and I use the things that I purchased this year. So that's my clothing category. Next, I had accessories, and this I broke down into some subcategories. So I had jewelry, and then bags, and then a few miscellaneous things. So for my accessories, I started with 120 items at the beginning of the year, and I finished with 128. So that broke down into 69 pieces of jewelry at the beginning of the year, which is now at 74, as I did get some earrings this year. For bags, I started the year with 20. I now have 23. If you'd like, I can link below my bag collection video that I filmed a few months ago. Since then, I have purchased 2 more bags, I think, but then I also sold one, so it's not completely accurate any longer, but that will give you a bit of a breakdown of my bag collection. And then I also had shoes, foldable shoes, which was like this little pouch that I had a pair of foldable shoes in that I actually got rid of, so that went from 1 to 0. Scarves, hats, gloves, belts, and sunglasses. Those all went down except for my shoes category, which went from 13 to 16. I actually purchased a lot of shoes this year, but I also threw out a lot that have gotten quite worn and I can't use any longer. The next category is the one where I saw the biggest difference in, and that was my beauty category. So in 2020, I really reevaluated my relationship with my beauty collection, and that included decluttering and finishing a lot of beauty products. So at the beginning of 2020, I had 572 pieces of makeup, or pieces of beauty, I should say, because it does include skincare. And then at the end of 2020, I have 455. So I went down by about 120 items. For more detail, my makeup category went from 379 to 253. So I particularly got rid of a lot of makeup. Then in my makeup tools, so this is brushes as well as like makeup bags and Z palettes and just miscellaneous things like that, I went from 84 items to 74 items, and that largely came down to decluttering my brush collection. For perfume is an item that I collect, so that definitely went up. I started the year with 52 items, and that went up to 74 over the course of the year. So I went from 22 full bottles of perfume to 35. I still have the same 4 body sprays I started the year with, but I went from 19 to 15 miniatures and 7 to 20 samples. So I am working on those categories. Perfume bottles, obviously I'm not aiming to finish anytime soon. They are quite large, but I started a project perfume in November that I can link down below as well. So those are my kind of strategies for finishing up, especially the miniatures and samples in my collection, to get those down a little bit, because I will definitely be purchasing more perfume. For skincare, I went from 19 to 22 items this year, and that's largely because I purchased a miniature set on Boxing Day, or prior to Christmas, I should say, and that bumped my category up a little bit, but otherwise I pretty much have one of everything, and that comes to 22. For body care, I went from 17 to 12. That included using up a lot of moisturizer and the leftover body washes that I have, because I don't use body wash anymore. I just use bar soap. And then in my hair care category, I went from 21 to 20 items. Hair care takes me a really long time to use up, so I'm not surprised that that went down by 1 over the course of a year. And then for my last category, I have books. So in books, I also include kind of reference books like dictionaries and cookbooks, as well as literary journals that I'm subscribed to and that I hold on to, and notebooks that I use for writing in for various things. So for my books category, I started the year with 344. That broke down to 52 unread books on my shelves, as well as 32 unread literary journals, and then a variety of other things, and my read books was at 199. At the end of the year, I'm finishing with 406 in the books category. So that's 64 unread books. Unfortunately, that has gone up, as well as 14 unread journals. So I basically halved the amount of journals I read this year. And I have 227 read books on my bookshelf now. So yes, that category did go up by 62. But I also read a lot of books, and books are kind of my life. I'm an academic and a scholar, so I have a lot of books. I've always had a lot of books. That doesn't really bother me. So those are all the numbers. I will also mention that during the Boxing Day and Christmas sales, I did make some purchases. So I still have 14 items that would fall into these categories on their way to me. So that I haven't included in the main tally, but I'll let you know how it kind of figures into the count. Just to keep things easier for myself, I only counted things in my stuff inventory or in my purchases when they actually arrived at my house, because otherwise I might double count things if I count them when I purchase them but also when they arrive. So just to make things easy, it doesn't count until it arrives at my house. At the beginning of 2020, I had 1,172 items across these 3 categories. And at the end of the year, not counting the 14 things on their way to me, I have 1,142 items. So with the 14 things coming, I have 1,156 separate items, which means that I have 16 less items than what I started the year with. Now, technically, I have achieved my goal of finishing the year with less items than I started the year with, but 16 in 1,100 is not a significant difference in the grand scheme of things, I think, for me. So let's break down kind of what I purchased over the year and how I kind of decluttered hundreds of things for my skincare and makeup sections, and then rebuilt those in my books and my clothing categories. So in my purchased spreadsheet of all the items that I purchased in 2020, I broke it down into 4 categories this time. So I had my books, my clothing, and my beauty categories, but I also included homewares because I was a little bit interested to see if I was kind of squirreling away purchases in miscellaneous homewares things, and maybe that's where I was spending money that I didn't quite realize I was spending. So those are not included in my stuff count, but I thought they were interesting to keep track of in my spending purchased categories. So over the year, I purchased, not including the 14 things on their way to me, that's not included yet because they haven't arrived at my house, I purchased 259 separate items. So that breaks down into 200 items that I purchased brand new and 59 purchased items that were secondhand when they came to me. So I purchased them from an individual rather than a company, I guess. That percentage-wise means that 77% of what I purchased this year was brand new and 23% was secondhand. So the reason that I'm keeping track of brand new versus secondhand is because when it comes to my spending on stuff, I've never actually had a problem with overspending, with spending more money than I have or more money than I can afford. I don't have a credit card. I'm not in any kind of consumer debt. I don't overdraw my bank account, like all those kind of things. I save a huge portion of my income, so that's never actually been a problem for me. So the kind of budgeting and tracking and looking at all my spending, it's not about the money in my case. In my case, it's about the amount of things, particularly in terms of waste. The main thing that I'm concerned about is generating more waste by buying more than I need, more than I can use, and purchasing everything new. So that's why I keep track of new versus secondhand, because I don't mind purchasing a lot of things secondhand, because that doesn't feel as wasteful to me as purchasing brand new. Please let me know how you feel about that down below and how you kind of mitigate that in your own life. But that's my main concern in my purchasing, is not so much the amount of money that I spend, but the waste that I'm generating by spending. I also kept track of the things that I was buying as replacement items. So whether something broke, I finished it up, or it became worn and I had to replace it. Just to see if I was kind of buying excess or if I was actually buying because I needed to fill a need. So 19% of the items that I purchased this year were replacement items. So not quite a fifth, but 19%. A lot of that obviously came out of my beauty category, particularly skincare. But I was also interested to see how many things would come into my life and then leave within a year. So whether I was using stuff up within a year, like a lot of skincare things, or if I was buying things and then throwing them away, or selling them, like clothing. I wanted to keep track of that. And then the other category was books that I brought in, read, and then let go of, because I do donate or trade or sell the vast majority of the books that I read, or at least, now that I know my numbers, the vast majority of the novels that I read. So of the 259 objects that I purchased in 2020, 20% of them have left my life since I purchased them within the same year, if that makes sense. So 3 of them were clothing items that I purchased and decided I didn't actually like or didn't work for me, and then I sold them on. And most of them were skincare and books otherwise. Of the 259 items I purchased in 2020, I broke it down that I was purchasing about 21 items every month. Now, to me, 259 items in a calendar year doesn't sound crazy. I don't think that's an enormous amount considering my stuff inventories at 1,100 separate items. What does sound crazy to me is 21 items a month. What is that? That's like 5 items a week. That seems like too much. That seems like I'm ordering or buying way too many separate objects. I don't need to be doing that, particularly because I'm not using them at that rate, obviously. The books that I'm purchasing, I'm not reading immediately and letting go of. The makeup that I'm buying, I'm not using up in a calendar year. The skincare, yes, I'm using up. The body care, yes. But the other things like the clothing, I'm gonna have for years. So it seems kind of odd to be constantly buying more when I can't use it up in the same rate. So that was something that really stood out to me, that number. In my mind, the number one thing that I purchase is beauty products. I feel as though I have like a real urge to buy beauty products all the time, but particularly as well, it feels like a category I'm not necessarily in complete control of. But I found by tracking all of my purchases that that's not actually the case. So I like I said, I love reading. I have a lot of books. In 2020, I purchased 77 books, which blows my mind. It doesn't feel like I have bought that many books. And that breaks down to 30% of the total items I purchased this year were books, which is so much higher than I would have guessed. So much higher. I had no idea I bought that many books. And I think that kind of speaks a lot to like my psychological relationship with buying books. I never feel guilty or like I need to make a stretch to buy a book. It just always feels really justified to me to buy a book because I know I'll read it eventually, and it's not frivolous. It never feels frivolous. So they kind of go through as unnoticed purchases in my life. So anyway, 77 books in a year. For clothing, I purchased 65 clothing items. So for a category that I absolutely love and have definitely purchased a lot of this year, more I'd say than usual, I did still purchase less than books. So 65 clothing items, which is 25% of what I purchased this year. In terms of beauty, the category that I feel is out of control, I purchased 99 items of beauty this year, and that's 38% of my overall object purchasing, which, yeah, about 40%, that's a significant chunk of stuff that I'm purchasing. But I also know that most of that was skincare. So interesting, more data for me. Then for homewares, I purchased 18 items in 2020, which is 7%. So nowhere near really a problem category. A lot of that was furniture that I was replacing for other less workable furniture, or I got a new office, so I needed to furnish that this year. So for those who are kind of data motivated or a little bit like data nerds out there, this kind of video might be interesting to you because I thought I knew my spending quite well. I thought I had quite a good understanding of what I was spending, and particularly after my no-buy year in 2019, I kind of thought I knew what my triggers were and what I spent my money on, what I was motivated to spend my money on. But this year really changed that. Having like the cold hard facts, having all the data about the stuff that I have in my life currently, as well as all the data about what I bring into my life in a calendar year, is really interesting and kind of helps me calibrate my budgeting, calibrate kind of how I run my life, I guess, and what I categorize as important or unimportant in terms of my spending, in terms of my stuff. Maybe you'd be interested in doing something like this for your own inventory of stuff, or maybe you'd rather not know. That's totally fine as well. I would be really interested to know though in the comments below how your purchasing compares to mine. I'm not here to judge. I'm not interested in any kind of judgment, but I am really curious and a little bit nosy and would love to know, am I purchasing more items than you are? Do I bring in way more than you would imagine purchasing in a calendar year? Or are you on the opposite end of the spectrum? Are you buying more than 5 objects a week? That kind of thing. I think particularly if you're really into buying makeup and skincare and beauty, it can be really easy to buy a lot of stuff at once, because a lip gloss, it doesn't really feel like a big purchase. So you can do it repeatedly and kind of it falls to the back of your mind and you forget about it. So with all of that data in mind, I came up with some goals for 2021. So in 2019, my one big goal was to not buy anything, and I kind of did that as a challenge, particularly because I think a lot of people in my life tell me that I have a spending addiction, a shopping addiction, because I love stuff. I love buying stuff, and I spend a lot of money on stuff. But I've never felt like I've had a spending addiction. I always know when to stop. I'm never overspending. I have a lot of money in savings, that kind of thing. So I was just kind of curious about if I could do it. And I found in 2019 that I could. I was perfectly capable of doing that, but I didn't want to. I like having stuff. I like buying stuff. So in 2020, I decided to really pull back and not give myself a huge goal. I just wanted to finish the year with less than what I started with, which really meant decluttering. It really meant kind of looking at the stuff that I had and clearing out the things that weren't me, that didn't represent me, that I didn't want to hold on to in my life anymore. But I didn't really put any kind of restraints on my spending otherwise, which meant that other than my obviously standard budget, I was pretty much free to spend on stuff. And that's how I kind of got these organic numbers that I'm finishing the year with. Thinking about how those two large goals for a yearly project didn't really work for me, but kind of just taught me more about my relationship with stuff and my relationship with spending. I decided that in 2021, instead of having a singular large goal, I'm gonna have 4 small goals. So I'll talk about those now. So with all the data that I collected in 2020 about my spending and my stuff, I decided that in 2021, my number 1 goal is to continue the original goal of finishing 2021 with fewer than 1,156 items. So I'm hoping to finish 2021 with less than I started the year with. And the reason for that is because I want to use up a lot of stuff. Not clothing necessarily, because that's a lot harder to use up in a year, but books and skincare and makeup. I want to use up the stuff that I have. So I have a few project pans planned that I will let you know of in the coming weeks. I'm also still going to complete my project perfume, so that will help me clear out some of my minis and my samples. And I just kind of want to really embrace the things that I have and use them to completion. So that's my first goal. My second goal, with all the data that I've collected again, is to purchase fewer items in 2021 than I purchased in 2020. So as a reminder, I purchased 259 items in 2020, and I'd like to purchase less next year. And again, the reason isn't because I spend too much money, it's because I want to really value the things that I buy, and I want to make sure they actually have a purpose, that I'm not spending to excess, that I'm not creating more waste, that I'm actually just buying what I need, what I want, and not kind of overstuffing my life with stuff. A specific goal that I have for my books is to bring my TBR pile, or my to be read pile, which is actually the bookshelf just there. I want to bring that down to 45 books or less. It's currently sitting at over 60, I think 66 or something like that. I'd like to bring it down to under 45. So the way that I've decided to do that is I am borrowing a trick from Jen from insert literary pun here. I'll have her channel linked for you. Every 3 books that I read on my to be read shelf, I can buy another one. So that way I'm not completely not buying any books, because there are a lot of books I'd love to buy and read, but I'm motivating myself like with a little carrot to finish the books that I already own first. So that's my goal for my to be read shelf. It sounds perfectly doable, but I know that I get so tempted by new books, and I buy new books pretty frivolously, considering. So that's my goal for my to be read shelf. And then finally, this is like my really serious goal that I know is going to be a little bit harder than the other ones. And that is that with my purchases in 2021, I want to reach a 50-50 split between new and secondhand. So this is what I'm really working towards with my creating less waste and buying less brand new, is that I would really like to reach 50% secondhand purchases of everything that I buy. So this, I think, is going to be particularly difficult, mainly because like 40% of what I purchase is beauty products, and those I can't really buy secondhand. Those I really need to buy new, which leaves 10% of everything else that I purchase up to just new. So I think that's going to be a little bit of a struggle, but I'm really dedicated to it. I'm very invested in finishing the year having purchased 50% of all my items secondhand. So those are my 4 goals for 2021 and my stuff. So please let me know what you think of this video, and what you think of my like really crazy categorizations and kind of meticulous data collection of all of my stuff. I am someone who is numbers motivated and data motivated. I really love knowing a lot about my personal data. I find that really interesting, and I'm definitely going to continue to do this. It kind of started a few years ago, actually in 2014, where I started meticulously tracking all of the beauty products I purchased and all of the ones I used up, to see if I could reach an equilibrium between what I used and what I spent. I've never quite reached an equilibrium. As you can imagine, I almost always spend more than I use up. But that's kind of where this all started, and it just grew through watching Hannah Louise and, you know, becoming a little bit more interested in my wastage and my spending in terms of how much I accumulate in a year. So there you go. That's quite a large video full of a lot of numbers and information, but I just thought it'd be interesting to share with you. I don't think I've really shared a lot about these kind of spending goals that I set for myself. Please let me know if this kind of thing interests you. I have a lot of data if anyone is interested in hearing more about that. I could definitely do something like a makeup inventory or a collection video about any of my categories. Please let me know if that would interest you. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep on tracking my spending, keep on tracking the amount of items that are coming in and out of my life, and really aim to hit these 4 goals by the end of 2021. So thank you so much for going through all my numbers with me and listening to my goals for the next year. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.